Hey there, friends. Wendy Freeman here from Double Page Spread. Just to letting you know, some of the greatest deals you can get for this holiday season can be found at DCBS, the discount comic book service. You can get all the Funkos and statues and crazy little things your heart may desire, as well as many, many graphic novels and trades at 50% off. So go check them out and their sister site, In Stock Trades. Also, I know you've heard me rave about how much I love the hair gloss from Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, and this year they have a whole new Yule line of hair gloss. They have one that is bourbon-soaked apples, and, I would like my hair to smell like bourbon, so I'm very into that. Also, ginger cardamom, a sparkle of fiery warmth on a cold winter's night, as well as one called the Bear Prince, shaggy fur, snow-flecked, and rose-touched. So, I would like my hair to smell like all of that. Also, you can check us out on the Threadless store. You can buy all your really cool double page spread merchandise, notebooks, stickers, shower curtains, everything you could want over there at doublepagespread.threadless.com. So, I hope you enjoyed the show. Hey there, welcome back to Double Page Spread. I'm your host, Miss Wendy Freeman, and tonight I am joined by the illustrious Mr. Ron Marz. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for having me, Wendy.
Oh, I'm so excited. Now, for my listeners out there, you have worked for every single company under the sun. You've had huge runs at Marvel and DC. You've created some of the most iconic characters we know. You've worked at Dynamite and all kinds of, pretty much every company ever, I feel.
I like to say that I've danced with all the girls at the party. I think the only sort of, medium to large American publisher I haven't worked for is Boom. And I guess at some point I'll have to rectify that. But I think I fit everybody else.
It's amazing. And you and Darryl Banks worked on Green Lantern for, 7 years?
Yeah, I think I lasted about 7 years on the book, and Darryl, I think he put in at least 8 and maybe, 8+, because he stuck around longer than I did.
Together, you co-created Kyle Rayner, who, he's my favorite Green Lantern. I don't know. I like him a lot. And Parallax, and you did so much. You really, really transformed the whole direction of the book.
Well, first, thank you. We had a ball doing it. A large part of that is the fact that DC allowed us to do that. You don't get to sort of make a wholesale change in the direction of a book without editorial blessing, and in our case, certainly editorial suggestion to take the book in that direction. So I guess we get the credit, but certainly certainly a large part of it is due to DC, giving us enough rope to hang ourselves, I guess. They let us take the ball and run with it on the book. And, Emerald Twilight was really a story that DC editorial handed to us and said, we would like you to hit these points in these 3 issues. And then you're going to create a new main character. And after that, they didn't really give us a whole lot of direction. They just let us do what we wanted to do for the most part, especially in terms of creating Kyle. With editorial oversight, certainly. They didn't just, get the pages and send them off to the printer. But, we got a lot of room to play in the sandbox, and it was a blessing.
Do you think you'd be allowed to have that much control now? Do you feel like the tone has shifted at the companies?
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely that you would get to just make up a brand new character and sort of run with it. In the current climate is that there's more editorial involvement than certainly there was 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And that's due in large part to the fact that the superhero properties, they're multimedia, transmedia franchises now, are worth a hell of a lot more money than they were 10 years ago because of film and television. So so publishers, understandably so, keep a tighter rein on what the creators are doing with the books. There's more, there's more oversight. There's more people looking over your shoulder. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just the new norm of how corporate comics are done. And I think that's a pendulum that swings back and forth. Certainly in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot more editorial control with editors sort of handing the stories to the writers to hand it to the artistic team. And then, in the 70s and 80s, it swung back to creators really kind of, running wild and doing what they wanted to great extent. And now it's swung back in the other direction. So, it's just a reality you have to deal with as a creator. And that going into the situation, that you don't get you're playing with somebody else's toys. You don't get to just do whatever you want.
You also got to do like a considerable run on Witchblade.
It was a book that I had frankly not even read very much when I got offered the chance to write it, and it was a book that I really didn't ever think about writing. But the offer came across my plate, and I thought, well, let's give this a try. And I said to Top Cow, the publisher at the time, I said, look, I'm where I come from, I'm concerned about making stories that pull the readers in via the characters. I want you to care enough about the characters to come back every month. And, Witchblade had a bit of a reputation for the stories being kind of frameworks for the main character, Sarah Pazzini's clothes to fall off and her to show up in a metal bikini. Mm-hmm. And I said, if that's, if those are the kind of stories you want, if, the sort of, sexy superhero stories are what you want, it's probably not a good fit for me because I don't have a lot of interest in writing that. And very much to their credit, they said, do what you do. We're hiring you to bring what you bring. And we never discussed it again as far as, hey, we need a sexy scene in this issue. It didn't come up for, at all. It didn't come up at all in almost 100 issues. So they really just let me do what I do. And I found out that the book turned out to be a great fit. It was very malleable in terms of what kind of stories you could tell. You could do a superhero-ish kind of story, or supernatural, or horror, or crime, police procedural. It was very expansive in terms of what you could, what kind of genres you could hit. And that's actually something that appeals to me a great deal as a writer, is to be able to flex different muscles and write different kinds of stories. So I could do that within the same series. And, like I said, it was a book that I never thought I would end up writing, and it turned out to be, one of the best fits of my career. And I did, I guess probably more than 100 issues by the time you figure in the miniseries and the side projects and stuff like that.
Yeah, I read a bunch of it last night. I found they have all of it collected on the library app. Like, you can just read it for free. They have like your whole collection there. It's pretty great. Yeah. So I like that it's so accessible, and it's a good jumping on point. Like, she's just this sort of struggling sheriff at the beginning, and you just take her through so much. And yeah, I like the crime elements. I like it when you do a lot of that stuff.
Well, I said, I think at the time, I said, I want the readers to care more about what she's doing when she's not, when she doesn't have the Witchblade, when she doesn't have this, supernatural armor on. I want the readers to just care about what she's doing in her daily life. Like, what is life like for a New York City police detective or an upstate sheriff, a woman who's very much in a man's world and very much a kick-ass character, but has to deal with, the real world and real life situations. That was the stuff that really interested me. And then for me, the supernatural stuff was the icing on the cake.
Also, speaking of sexy stuff, you had done John Carter. You had done some John Carter stuff. And I mean, Deja Thoris is another tricky character. About, like, how do you make her more than just the fact that she's scantily clad?
Yeah, well, look, the 12-year-old in me that read the John Carter novels voraciously as a kid and loved them and fell in love with Deja Thoris. That was an absolute bucket list job for me. I've wanted to write John Carter since I was 12 years old. But obviously, you're dealing with a property that's 100 years old, and was written or created in a completely different era. So how do you deal? How do you remain true to the roots of it and make sure that Deja Thoris isn't just the damsel in distress, the scantily clad damsel in distress, might I add. Um, in fact, in the novel, she was, I believe, naked the entire time, which I would assume was pretty shocking for turn of the century readers. So I hope I did. I hope I did both ends of that spectrum. I hope that Deja Thoris was able to kick ass and take names, but we also didn't completely walk away from the character as she was created.
Now, you and Darryl Banks are back. You guys are reunited. You've got a new project coming.
Yeah, we got the band back together.
Yes, that's so wonderful. And I had read an interview where people just constantly ask you, "What's Darryl Banks up to? Where's Darryl Banks at?" So I'm sure that's a question you're so tired of.
Yeah, well, it comes up certainly, and I don't mind answering it. Darryl, he's one of the guys in the business who I still think is a brilliant artist and has done a ton of great stuff. But he's one of the guys that's really just known for one thing. He's known for Green Lantern. He's done other things here and there, but nowhere near the length and popularity of what we were able to do on Green Lantern. So when he was done with Green Lantern, he did odds and ends, and then eventually sort of moved into commercial art because, frankly, it's more lucrative and not anywhere near as hard as drawing sequential comics every month.
Right. Well, I mean, who can blame him? You need to make money.
Well, it's comics, particularly for artists. I mean, on the one hand, comics is the best job in the world because we just get to make up stuff and people pay us for it. It's brilliant, and I love my job. On the other hand, especially for artists, it's a grind. It's I think the hardest artistic job you can have. It's certainly a hell of a lot harder than being a concept artist for video games or movies or it's you have to be able to draw everything because everything comes up in a comic book story. You have to be able to draw two people sitting at a table talking. You have to be able to draw Galactus eating a planet and everything in between. So it's hard and it's a grind. And it can certainly wear you down. It's a lot of long hours at the table. So I totally understand it when guys who are in comics end up stepping away to do storyboards or commercial illustration or animation. I know a number of comic book artists who have moved over to animation, and they are stunned by how easy the gig is because the workload is considerably less intense than what you have to do every day for comics. So while I'm sorry that comics had sort of lost Darryl for quite a while he was doing commercial art, I'm really happy to have him back now, and if anything, he's gotten even better over the years.
So you've been doing this historical work lately. You did a book, Beast of the Black Hand.
Yeah, that's sort of post World War I, but not quite our world. It's sort of one step removed where there's a bit more diesel punk technology and, of course, giant monsters summoned up from the ether. But that's very definitely the period, 1919, 1920.
Mm-hmm. So you did that historical work and you kickstarted that. And now you've got this brand new book, Harkin's Raiders. Please tell me about that.
Harkin's Raiders is a World War II story, and it's very much our world. It's our World War II. And it's historical fiction in the way that, The Dirty Dozen is historical fiction. It's a World War II adventure story set within within the confines of occupied Europe, and it's not an examination of the horrors of war, even though there's some rough stuff and people die. But the main thrust of Harkin's Raiders is an adventure story, kind of like the 60s and 70s World War II films that we got. Dirty Dozen, Kelly's Heroes,
Great Escape,
Guns of Navarone, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Is it based on like a particular sort of real event?
It's not based on a real event, but it's based around a real organization called the SOE, which was the Special Operations Executive. It was a British wartime organization that Churchill actually got going, and it was the agency that looked after the agents who were going to go into occupied Europe and blow up bridges and work with the local resistance. It's espionage, spy stuff, special missions, special ops. The real SOE operations absolutely read like stories that you would make up, because they're just huge stories of heroism and carefully plotted plans to destroy Nazi strongholds. It's really brilliant stuff. So that's the basis for what we're doing. And our particular team, the Raiders of Harkin's Raiders, are Americans. It's a team of 5 Americans, led by an officer named Harkin. And they're obviously made-up characters. We're not dealing with any real-life soldiers. But the story that we're telling is not completely unrealistic. The mission is to parachute into occupied Finland, grab up a scientist who has been conscripted to work on a secret Nazi war plan, and get him out of the country back to England so that they can debrief him, get everything they need out of him. And certainly, if the mission went like clockwork, you probably wouldn't be telling this story. So as soon as they're over Finland, everything goes sideways, and the story is about them scrambling to still get the mission completed, and sort of set up the next storyline that we hope to tell down the road.
Did you have any family in World War II?
Yeah, I did. My father actually fought in World War II. I was a very late in life baby. As my mom used to say, I was a surprise. And then when I got old enough, I realized that actually meant accident. So my father was actually a World War II veteran. He was a tail gunner in a B-24J in the Pacific Theater. And he had some fairly hair-raising stories about his experiences. And I actually wrote a comic story about some of my father's war experiences that Rick Leonardi and Andy Lanning drew. And that's been printed as a charity book. So going back to a World War II story is actually kind of, for me, it's kind of fitting, because that was a conflict that I had secondhand knowledge of from my father telling some of the war stories that he had. He didn't tell a whole lot of stuff, but he did share with me enough things that I could piece together a story about his experiences.
Yeah, see, I think it's so great, and I'm always sad that there are less war comics. We used to have things like Enemy Ace and all those war comics. Even like I Love the Nom, like all these great books. And I noticed Kickstarter, like lately, I know I donated to like they're the same Glansman reprints that are coming out.
Oh yeah.
Combat. Yeah, so like you can donate and you can get these new versions of the Combat comics, stuff like that. And I just want to see, do you think the Kickstarter is the only way to really get war comics out now?
I think Kickstarter allows creators to tell the kinds of stories that they're passionate about, but might not be fully embraced at a mainstream publisher. And which isn't to say that there aren't war stories out there. I mean, that's kind of what Garth Ennis has been doing for the last 5-10 years. Every chance he gets, and I guess they actually announced a new one for Garth and Steve Epting yesterday. which I think is awesome. Garth is a World War II aficionado and just a brilliant writer. So I'm glad that his clout can get that sort of stuff out there. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of other war stories, there's just not as much of an audience for it as you would hope, and frankly, the fact that it's a World War II piece, or even some other historical era, means that it's a lot tougher to sell it as a movie property, because it automatically becomes a fairly highly budgeted movie, because you have to you can't just go out in the street and shoot it. You have to go back in time to shoot it. You have to make everything. You have to create the illusion that you're in occupied Europe in World War II. So there are some publishers who are naturally a little skeptical about doing those sorts of films, because it's just an economic, or doing those sorts of comics, because they're not as easily optioned and not as easily turned into films. It's just an economic reality that part of the economic pie for comics is hopefully optioning your rights, and sometimes they actually get turned into movies. So Kickstarter allows creators to tell ultimately any kind of story they want, because we're going direct to the audience. The audience is essentially paying us ahead of time to deliver the product. Maybe maybe the kind of numbers that you would do as a monthly book through Diamond and into the direct market wouldn't be what would keep a book afloat. But to do something on Kickstarter and sort of appeal to what might be a niche audience, you can certainly do that, and hopefully Harkin's funds were about halfway there, with about half the campaign to go. So I think that math works out properly, but we gotta add pledges every day. Kickstarter has allowed, I think, a wider range of stories to be told, stuff that maybe a more mainstream publisher wouldn't take a risk on. Those kind of stories are now getting told, because the audience is showing up for it ahead of time.
Yeah, that bums me out that they don't see that as optionable. I mean, when you think even last year we had Dunkirk, which was sweeping and epic.
Oh yeah, just brilliant movie. I'm hugely glad that I got to see it on a big screen. Yeah, but that's the movie that Nolan wanted to make. If he decides he wants to make a World War II movie, everybody lines up for it. It's just I think it's the exception rather than the rule. At least from my perspective, because I'm a history buff. A lot of the stories I want to tell tend to be set in other eras, and sometimes it's an uphill push to get a publisher to commit to that. And I've had publishers tell me, look, we need something that's set in the here and now, because film budgeting is a part of this process now. I'm not necessarily saying it's a great idea that we have to avoid certain subjects in comics because they're expensive, if and when maybe you put them on film. But that's just reality. And it's an economic reality more than a creative one. So you have to take that into account when you cast this stuff out there.
That makes me so sad. So sad. All right.
Well, but the other side of the coin is that the beauty of comics is, Darryl can draw a World War II sequence for the same price that he would draw, like I said, two people sitting at a Starbucks in 2018. That's the real beauty of comics, is that it's just lines on paper, and you don't have to worry about CGI and extras and all that kind of stuff if you're going to do a big war movie. So in some ways, I think maybe it gives us a little bit more. It gives us a little bit more opportunity to take advantage of that stuff and tell those kinds of stories. But maybe we just need Kickstarter to be the venue to make them real.
So let's tell everybody about the Kickstarter reward level.
Well, you can get the hardcover Harkin's Raiders graphic novel. because that's what we're doing. And we this is the same format that we did Beast the Black Handed, which is about a 13x9 hardcover, and it's really modeled after the European album model. It's sort of the deluxe package for this kind of story. So you can get the hardcover graphic novel. You can get a hardcover sketchbook called The Black Book. We've done a series of them at Ominous Press. We've done books with Bart Sears, Andy Smith, Jim Starlin, Graham Nolan. So the Darryl Banks Black Book will be the 5th in the series. And it's 112 pages of mostly unpublished Darryl Banks artwork. There's some classic images and some storytelling in there. But a big chunk of the book is stuff that people have never seen. Commissions, private stuff, commercial work that just hasn't been widely distributed. So for Darryl Banks fans, this is 112 pages of Darryl Banks goodness that the vast majority of which you have not seen before. So those are really the two main pillars of the campaign. And we've got a bunch of other rewards along with it. Darryl's doing commission pieces. There's a chance to actually be in the book, to have your likeness in the book on a particular page where agents are being selected for the next mission. You can actually buy the cover of Harkins Raiders. You can buy interior pages of Harkins Raiders. There's a military patch and a challenge coin that we've designed.
That's so cool.
And are being manufactured. So it's we've done a few of these Kickstarters at Ominous Press, which is our publishing company, and I'm the editor-in-chief and part owner. So we've hopefully each one's a little better than the last one as we hone what we do and hone what the audience might want. So we try to do an art book as well as the regular graphic novel, and then art rewards and all the stuff that you would expect with a Kickstarter. But then you've got some people want tchotchkes, some people want stuff. So in this instance, we're doing military patches and challenge coins like the military, particularly the Air Force, has as keepsakes and gifts to give each other. And if we come back and do more, there's all sorts of stuff we talked about. Maybe there'll be a military attaché bag and a bunch of different stuff. So it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, a Kickstarter is a hell of a lot of work. I've always been told that by people that were doing them, and now that we've gotten into doing them ourselves, with some office staff help and obviously fulfillment help on the other end of the campaign, it is a hell of a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. You just get to make what you want. You're often working with your friends, and then you can kind of go, hey, what would be cool? Let's make a challenge coin for the Harkins Raiders team, and you can go do that, and people actually want it. It's I've always been interested in Kickstarters and have backed campaigns, but now that we've sort of settled into this as part of the business model, it's really a pleasure to do it because it connects you directly to the audience in a way that you're not connected when you're just working through a publisher that's putting stuff into the direct market. And we're certainly doing that too at Ominous Press. We work with IDW for single issues and trade paperbacks, but the Kickstarter stuff allows you to really work with your audience almost in a one-on-one fashion.
Maybe next time you could do dog tags.
That was actually part of the list, and we thought dog tags would be awesome. And we actually sought out a company that can make dog tags. It's actually the same company that's doing the patches and the challenge coins. But we thought, let's not lose our minds here and offer too much stuff. So let's get this one funded. We'll come back and do a sequel, and I promise dog tags.
All right, yay! Now, it's been like 25 years or so since you did DC versus Marvel. Is that right?
Yeah, almost. I'm not, maybe not quite, but that close enough.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's been like, but I remember when that came out. That was a 4-issue miniseries, DC versus Marvel, and that was like the biggest deal ever.
Yeah, it was. It was the job you dreamed about since you were 10 years old, by far. And it's still kind of a pinch me moment when I look back at some of that stuff and go, wow, they actually, one, Marvel and DC actually liked each other well enough at the time to do this and to join forces, and two, they actually let me do it. So yeah, it's a highlight certainly in my career, and I'm proud of it. It was a big popcorn sort of event, and the only drawback is, it's probably never going to get reprinted because Marvel and DC have to get together and agree to do all that stuff, and they just, between film and television, they're both making enough money that they don't really need each other anymore.
That's a shame, because I remember, Amalgam, like, that was a huge deal. That was like the biggest thing ever when that came out, was that idea of like, oh my gosh, these crazy characters that are mashups of each other,
Well, that was the real surprise. We had the first meeting about Marvel versus DC at the late Mark Grunwald's apartment. He was one of the main editors up at Marvel, and just a terrific guy, huge comic fan, obviously, terrific writer, wonderful man, and I'm sorry we lost him as early as we did. But the project at that point was so secret that they didn't want to have meetings at the offices. So Mark Grunwald, Mike Carlin, Peter David, and myself met at Mark's apartment uptown in Manhattan to talk about this, to thrash out the story beats and the sort of the battles that were going to take place, the heroes that were going to face each other. And that's all I thought we were doing, which to me was enough. But when Peter and I got there, Mike and Mark let the other shoe drop, which was, between issues 3 and 4, we're going to mash the universes together, and we're going to do a dozen books that we've, here's what we came up with. And they showed us this literally handwritten sheet of, like, here are the characters that are going to star in these Amalgam books. And I think both of our jaws hit the floor, because that was completely unexpected.
Some of those titles were so cool, like Doctor Strange Fates, or like some of them were there.
Well, obviously, Strange Fate was, Strange Fate's the best one because I worked on it. So that. But when the list came out and I saw Strange Fate on it, I immediately said, "Well, I'm doing that one. Like, I'm doing that one, or I'm out of here right now." And they said, "Well, that's fine. Pick whatever one you want." But yeah, literally, I just felt like, oh my God, I love Doctor Strange. I love Dr. Fate. I got to do that one. And they said, okay, fine, just go do that. We'll let you know who the editor is going to be, and you guys can work it out. And not long after, was assigned to an editor. I went up to the DC offices to discuss it, and I said, I don't care who you get to pencil it, but we got to get Kevin Nolan to ink it, because he's the guy. And the editor said, well, how about we get Jose Luis Garcia Lopez to draw it? And again, my jaw hit the floor, because he's the best of the best. And the Doctor Strange Fate issue is actually the only time I've ever had stage fright writing anything in comics in almost 30 years. Because I froze up, because I had to write something that was worthy of Garcia Lopez and Kevin Nolan. And for 2 or 3 weeks, I couldn't write anything. I was just stalled, because I had stage fright. And the editor would call me, once a week, and then every few days as it went on, he said, we want to get him started. Do you have any, you got some script? What's going on? And I kept having to say, well, I'm working on it. I'm getting the ideas set. Everything's fine. And finally, it occurred to me that I could write anything and it was going to look great because I was working with Garcia Lopez and Nolan. And like once I had passed that hurdle, everything, I think I wrote the story in like a day and a half.
Because originally, Garcia Lopez and John Romita Jr. were going to be the ones doing DC versus Marvel.
Well, that was the initial plan. That was those were the first two artists that were mentioned at that meeting at Mark Grunwald's apartment, because they were certainly emblematic of each company,
right? They're the most
completely.
Iconic, yeah.
And it made the most sense. And I think Garcia Lopez ended up turning it down because he didn't want to draw all those superheroes. It was going to be a lot of work. And I think the Marvel side of it, I had heard that a number of people were offered the book, John Jr., both Adam and Andy Kubert, and they had really great gigs on other books, principally X-Men, and ended up not wanting to make the leap to a side project, even though everybody kind of thought it was going to be a big deal. They stayed where they were, and that's how we ended up with Claudio Castellini, who was certainly who was freed up. I had worked with him before, and he very much is out of the John Buscema school of comic art. And unless you're talking about Kirby, that's what Marvel Comics looks like. How to draw comics the Marvel way is John Buscema. So there was a fit there with Claudio. And then when Garcia Lopez was not going to do it, Dan Jurgens was the obvious choice. And I've been friends with Dan for 25 years, so I was happy to get a chance to finally work with him. And it's an interesting contrast in art styles, but I think the whole thing meshes together fairly well.
Over the years, do you ever find yourself thinking about other character battles that would have been better? Do you ever think about that? Like, why didn't we team up, Daredevil and Batman or something?
Well, I think the only regret I have from that whole project was that we didn't have, 500 pages. We had 140 pages or whatever the final number was, maybe 100, 140, 150. Because the idea was to, sort of tell this story and get in and get out in 5 months, because we had the amalgam stuff slipped in there. So really the one regret that I do have is that we didn't have a big fat page count to really pull the whole thing off. I think certainly if something like that ever happened now, every superhero battle would be its own one shot or mini series, and it would be a 1,000-page story by the time everybody got done with it. So maybe in some ways it was better that we sort of that we hopefully left the audience wanting more. I certainly could have written Superman and the Hulk pounding on each other for 20 pages, but it had to get over in 4 pages or whatever number we had.
I do like Dazzler versus Black Canary.
Did we do that?
No, I'm saying that's what I would do.
Oh, all right. Well, that was, like I said, it's like being 10 years old and making a list in your school notebook of who should fight who, which is exactly what we did at Grunwald's apartment. Sat down with a notebook and said, well, I guess Green Arrow's got to fight Hawkeye because that's obvious, and Aquaman's got to fight Namor. And after I got out of the meeting, we met at Mark's apartment, then went for lunch, and then we went our separate ways. I got back to my car to drive home, and I thought to myself, wow, we actually did that, and we're going to do this, and it's real. It was very surreal to sort of be in the midst of it and making up all this stuff that that every kid that reads comics has dreamed about forever, and then realizing, oh, we're actually doing this. This is not just idle chat at the comic shop. This is stuff that we actually get to do. It's like I said, it's still a pinch me moment.
So among your other vast collaborators, there are a couple really interesting things in here. That you did that one football comic thing with Israel Adonijah.
Oh yeah.
How did that come about?
I met Izzy. So Israel Adonijah is a former NFL player, played a decade for the Bears, and also was with the Detroit Lions at the end of his career. He has since retired. I met Izzy through a mutual friend who introduced us because Izzy has always been a comic fan since he was a kid, and had an idea for a comic and wanted to make the comic. So we sat down for breakfast for the first time at San Diego. I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago at this point. And he told me his idea, and he showed me this 70-page story Bible that he had constructed and gotten some artwork for and everything. And he said, "Can we turn this into a comic?" And I said, "Sure, that's what I do." And it was actually, it's a really clever idea with some really well fleshed out characters. So we ended up doing a 5-issue miniseries called The Protectors. I wrote it. Bart Sears drew it. A terrific colorist named Niraj Menon, who's worked with me on a number of projects, colored it. And we self-published it through Israel Adonijah's Athleta Comics. Those issues. So there are. We did the first and second issues as a 0 issue and a number 1 issue as separate entities, and then we just went right to the trade paperback, which there are still copies floating around out there. And it's also on the Madefire app for the Magic Leap platform, the Magic Leap 1 goggles. And I have done that experience with Magic Leap goggles, which are out for developers now. And I got to say, it's pretty amazing to read your comic as it floats in the air in front of you. It's absolutely delightful. I've been doing stuff with Magic Leap for a number of years, so I've had a ringside seat to see the development of what they're doing. So to have the Protectors on their app, on their platform is actually a treat. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that I might be working on a sequel to The Protectors even right now.
Oh, well,
he said, not wanting to admit to anything.
I've met Israel Adonijah at a couple of Chicago events, and he seems like he's a really just earnest dude. He seems like he's really, really sincere.
He is the best guy in the world. He is like Uncle Izzy to my kids, and just one of the most genuine, nicest people I have ever met, who could, in fact, break you in half at any point that he wanted to. But he's a giant teddy bear, loves comics, has such a good heart, is doing amazing things, in Chicago and elsewhere in terms of charitable initiatives. He's kind of a superhero himself. He's kind of the best of humanity and what we should all aspire to be. So I'm really happy to be working with him on a number of different projects, and like I said, we're actually working on a sequel to The Protectors right now, and I'm having a ball doing it. I'm trying to capture the kind of stories and the feel that I got from books like The Avengers and X-Men and Teen Titans when I was a kid. I mean, I was very much drawn to teen books and that interaction in superhero teams. So that's what I'm trying to bring to The Protectors, and so far I'm really happy with it.
That's great. I can't wait to have you back in Chicago. I hope you guys are doing another event together.
Yeah, I'm usually at C2E2, and I know I will be in Chicago later in the year for a different show. But I don't think they've announced me for it yet, so I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Another really fascinating collaborator was, I remember that very short-lived Virgin line of comics, because I remember, wasn't it the one like Grant Morrison was doing like the Mahabharata or something for?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, that was like a big deal. And you did something with Deepak Chopra.
I did, and it came out. I don't think the print issues ever finished coming out, but I adapted one of Deepak Chopra's screenplays into a comic, and that was really cool. I had to, it was sort of an adaptation job, but also an editing job. So because we had to figure out what we could actually leave out, what we could, leave on the editing room floor, and still tell the complete story. And I know all the issues were eventually finished, and I believe are available digitally from Liquid Comics, which is what the Virgin eventually turned into. But that whole thing came about because Deepak Chopra's son, Gotham Chopra, was a fan of CrossGen comics and a fan of what I was doing at CrossGen. So again, a mutual friend reached out and put us together, and I ended up editing and doing some writing for Virgin because Gotham was familiar with my work elsewhere. And I really enjoyed the whole experience. It was very much a dive into the deep end of the pool for me, because I was working with some really brilliant Indian creators and dealing with Indian mythology and concepts that I was not overly familiar with when we started. So it was a crash course for me to get up to speed. And now I've worked on a number of projects that are in India and have visited, and hope to visit again next year. And it's a very, no pun intended, it's a very different world over there, with different storytelling concepts, and obviously a very much different mythology that everyone's familiar with. So it's an interesting experience to very much be the outsider and trying to pierce that, trying to understand these stories that a great deal of the population over there have been exposed to since they were really young children. So it's a place that I really like to explore, and hopefully can do some more.
That's so cool, because obviously they have a whole wealth of mythology we're not familiar with. And they have the whole Bollywood industry, which is so much more money than even what we do with Hollywood, So yeah.
It's well, there's a couple people over in India. There's a few people there. So obviously, there's a huge population. It's a huge country, and there's a craving for entertainment, for content. I did a convention over there a few years ago, and so the superhero stuff, especially in terms of the movies, was just starting to break over there. It was obviously what Marvel and DC do in films is a worldwide thing, and it was really picking up speed over there, and really bringing people to that superhero archetype storytelling. And it was just, it was a mob scene at the convention that I did. It was absolutely packed every day, and people embracing not only their own storytelling traditions, but the stuff that was coming in from outside as well.
All right, so let's wrap this up. So once again, let's tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find Harkins Raiders.
I am mostly found on Twitter because there's a Facebook fan site, but I don't pay, that someone else maintains for me. So I am on Facebook. It is really me. But if you want to get a hold of me, if you want to reach out to me, Twitter's the place. It's just at Ron Marz. Harkins Raiders is on Kickstarter right now. You can simply search Ron Marz, Darryl Banks, and Harkins Raiders, and it will bring you right to it. The campaign lasts until December 21st. And as I said, we're about halfway there. So, come give us a pledge. We'll get you a really nice book in a few months.
That's so cool. And finally, favorite World War II film?
Favorite World War II film? Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot, and I should have a ready answer for this, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
If I say Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's cheating, isn't it?
I'll let it go.
All right. Well, so favorite adventure film with Nazis as the bad guys. My answer is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I guess specific World War II film. I there's so many, but I really, I was really affected by Saving Private Ryan, so I'd probably have to say that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
It's a pleasure, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a good day.